The contact was already 11 days old by the time they moved into position. I had the full spread on my board by then. 11 hulls, running dark, tucked into the debris field at the far edge of Kale's corridor, like they'd been there since the mapping lane was charted. They were patient, I'd give them that. They held their thermal signatures below the ambient scatter of the field, ran their active sensors in narrow cone bursts on a 14-minute cycle, so the return would look like background ionization noise, and they stayed far enough back that a standard survey cruiser's passive array would have logged them as geological clutter and moved on. We were not a standard survey cruiser. The ISV Kale's Margin was listed in the Interstellar Survey Commission's public registry as a long-range mapping vessel, Class 6 configuration, crew of 41, tasked with corridor baseline surveys in the outer approach lanes. That was accurate. It was also not the whole picture. The array buried in the Margin's keel was 60 meters of signals intelligence architecture that the Commission had never catalogued, and the 6 of us running it from sub-level stations weren't on the crew manifest that any third party would ever see. My name was Davin Seal, and my official title was Systems Integration Supervisor. What I actually did was listen to the dark until it told me what was in it. I picked up the first Vethori signature on day 3. It was a thermal ghost, 40 milliseconds of elevated return off a flat surface at the wrong angle for debris, gone before the passive array could build a track. I flagged it, widened the keel array's discrimination window, and waited. On day 4 I had 2. On day 5, 4. By day 8, I had confirmed 9 distinct hulls and the ghost signatures of 2 more that were doing a better job of staying quiet than the rest. I built the track on all 11 of them without running a single active pulse. I ran the traffic analysis on their sensor cycles and mapped their communication architecture from the burst-compressed relay packets they were passing between ships, short enough that a listening post would need the exact decode key to pull anything useful out of the carrier wave. We had the decode key. It had taken the Commission's Signals Research Division 14 months and 4 captured relay buoys to build it, and they had given it to the Margin on the quiet assumption that we might eventually need it. I read 11 days of Vethori internal communications. Their Armada commander was a flag rank officer named Vethori. They used the name as a title, not a personal designation, which told me something about the command structure. The Vethori had been reporting to a higher authority every 48 hours. The survey vessel is confused, disoriented, not responding to our presence. No anomalous behavior detected. Assessment proceeding. He was convinced we were stumbling through their approach zone because we didn't know it was their approach zone. His assessment reports were thorough and confident, and completely wrong in every particular that mattered. I let him write them. The Vethori Sovereignty's contact doctrine, as best the Commission understood it from 40 years of peripheral observation, was a surveillance-first protocol. They did not make contact. They watched until they understood a species, its capabilities, its command logic, its response to pressure. And then they made a determination about whether that species was a problem. We had never been on the receiving end of the full protocol, because we had never penetrated this deep into their approach zone. The Margin had done so deliberately, on a route the Commission had calculated would draw their attention, because the Commission wanted to know how the Vethori decided. The answer, it turned out, was that they watched until they were certain, and then they moved into their assessment position, close enough to run active targeting solutions of their own, and they began the final phase. They moved on day 11. I was at my station when the displacement returns came through. All 11 hulls, slow and deliberate, repositioning into a 3-layer arc, 200 kilometers off our port quarter. Assessment formation. I'd seen the geometry in the intelligence files. They were going to run a full active sweep on us once they were in position, light us up, confirm our configuration down to the hull plating, and then decide. The Vethori's report to his command that evening, which I was reading as he composed it, contained the phrase I had been waiting for. The vessel is unaware of our presence, and will remain so through the assessment phase. I leaned back in my station chair and looked at the board for a moment. 11 clean tracks, full communications intercept, targeting solutions built on all 11 hulls, quietly refined across 8 days of passive observation while they thought we were mapping rock. I had the Vethori's command codes, his reporting schedule, his formation's emergency dispersal pattern, and his full 11-day assessment log. I had a complete picture of a fleet that believed it was invisible. I keyed the ship-wide channel and said, "Bridge, SEAL, they're in position. Recommend we proceed." Captain Rendos's voice came back flat and even. "Confirmed. SEAL, you have the con on this." That was not standard commission protocol. It was the protocol we had agreed on before the Margin left dock, because this was my board, my 11 days of work, and my read of the moment. I had earned the call. I opened the targeting solution to all 11 hulls simultaneously. Not a weapons lock, not a weapons system activation. Just a precise sensor designation of every Vethori hull in the Ark, tight enough that their own threat detection systems would register it as a targeting event. Then I opened a communications channel on the Vethori military command frequency, the one I had pulled from their internal relay traffic, and transmitted. I addressed the Vethsorak by name. Then I transmitted 11 days of surveillance records. Every thermal signature, from the first 40-millisecond ghost on day 3, every sensor cycle they had run, timed to the second, every burst-compressed relay packet, decoded, every assessment report, transcribed in their own notation format, with a commission translation appended. The full 11-day dossier, sent in a single compressed burst on their command frequency, formatted in their own data protocol, so there would be no ambiguity about whether we had received it or whether we understood what we had received. I included one additional file at the end. It was a single-frame sensor image, captured on day 8, of the Vethsorak's flagship at maximum array resolution, sharp enough to read the hull registry markings on the forward command tower. I had held it back for 11 days, specifically for this moment. If there was going to be any doubt about the quality of what we'd built, that image closed it. The Vethsorak's internal channel spiked with traffic the moment the burst completed. Not burst compressed this time. Raw voice, multiple speakers, the decode algorithms pulling fragments, the full formation. 11 days. They have the command codes. How long have they? The flagship registry. The flagship registry. I let it run for 30 seconds before I muted the feed. I had heard what I needed to hear. The Vethori Armada went silent. Not radio silence. They had been running radio silence for 11 days. This was a different silence. The kind that happens when 11 ships with active sensor sweeps standing by all cease their pre-sweep alignment, burns at the same moment, and just hold position. My board showed all 11 hulls stationary in the assessment arc, not dispersing, not advancing, not doing anything at all. The Vethsorak's internal channel, which I was still monitoring, had gone completely dark. I let the silence run. It lasted 19 minutes. I know, because I was watching the clock and trying to decide whether 19 minutes was the Vethori equivalent of reaching for a weapon or the Vethori equivalent of sitting down. During minute 11, one of my analysts passed me a handwritten note. She had pulled a partial decode on the Vethsorak's raw voice spike and found a phrase the algorithms had flagged as a command register idiom. The closest translation she had was something like, "Contain the assessment." I read it twice and set it down. Whatever that meant inside a Vethori command structure, the 11 hulls were still sitting exactly where they had been when the burst landed. Nobody was moving. That was what mattered. The channel opened on minute 19. The voice that came through was not the Vethsorak. It was older, calmer, and carried the kind of controlled flatness that I recognized as someone keeping a very large feeling inside a very small container. The translation algorithms rendered it in near real time. "You have been aware of our presence since the 3rd day of your survey passage." It was not a question, I answered anyway. "Since the 3rd day, we confirmed the full formation on day 8. We have been reading your internal communications since day 4. Another silence. Shorter this time, 6 minutes. "Your vessel is listed as a survey platform." "It is a survey platform," I said. "We were surveying." I heard something in the channel then that the algorithms couldn't translate cleanly. A sound that the notation file flagged as a non-linguistic vocalization. I had no cultural context for it. I filed it for the debrief and kept going. "What do you want?" the voice said. It was a reasonable question. I had thought about how to answer it for most of 11 days. "We want to be known accurately," I said. Whatever you decide about us, we want it based on what we actually are. The channel stayed open. I could hear the Vethori command deck in the background. Not the words, just the texture of a room full of officers processing something they had not prepared a doctrine response for. You allowed the surveillance to continue, the voice said. You could have broken contact on day 3. Yes. You chose to let us complete our assessment. We chose to let you think you were completing your assessment, I said. There's a difference. 9 minutes this time. I watched the hulls on my board. Nothing moved. The Vethorak's internal channel came back online briefly. 3 seconds of traffic, burst compressed, to a destination outside the formation. I flagged it for later. Whatever he was reporting, it was going to a command level above what I had been monitoring, on a frequency I didn't yet have a full decode for. That 3-second burst was going to take the Commission's research division considerably longer than 6 months. Then one of the 11 hulls in the arc shifted position. Not much. Less than 100 meters. The kind of micro-burn you make to maintain station. My targeting solution adjusted automatically and stayed locked. I watched it carefully. After 40 seconds, the hull steadied. No further movement from any of them. I had the distinct impression that someone in that formation had considered doing something and then thought better of it. When the channel reopened, the voice said, "We will withdraw." That was all. No terms, no counter-transmission, no demand for the data I had collected. Just, "We will withdraw." I understood, in the way that you understand something before you've worked out exactly why, that this was significant. Understood, I said. The 11 hulls broke the assessment arc in sequence, steady and unhurried, and began their withdrawal burn. No dispersal pattern. They left in formation, the way you leave when you want the other party to see that you are not running. The Vethorak's voice came through once more, in the last seconds before the formation passed outside easy communication range. The translation algorithms gave me a string of notation, and then a flag. Untranslated phrase, insufficient corpus. I recorded it. All 6 of us in the signals suite spent the next 6 months on that phrase, pulling every analogous construction we could find in the Vethori corpus we had built from the relay intercepts. We got there eventually. It meant, as best we could render it, we did not see you. Not as an admission of failure. Not as a technical statement, as a philosophical claim, the Vethori equivalent of acknowledging that you had encountered something that did not fit inside the category you had prepared for it. We did not see you meant, you were not what we were looking for, and therefore we were not, in any meaningful sense, looking at you. I have thought about that phrase a great deal in the years since. First contact, in the version most people imagine it, is the moment you appear to someone who didn't know you were there. The ship decloaks, the fleet arrives, the hail goes out. That's the shape people put on it. What happened in Kale's corridor was the other version. The Vethori spent 11 days believing they were the ones doing the looking. They built their assessment, wrote their reports, and moved into position. Certain, methodical, confident in the picture they had assembled. They thought first contact was something they would initiate when they were ready. We made first contact on day 3, from 800 kilometers away, in a signal suite they never knew existed, with 40 milliseconds of thermal ghost off an angled hull plate. By the time the Vethorak opened that channel, both sides already knew exactly what the other one was. That's the part that stays with me, not the silence afterward, or the phrase we spent 6 months translating, or even the look on Captain Doss's face when the formation withdrew. It's the fact that when you let someone spend 11 days deciding who you are, and then you show them the notes you've been taking while they did it, first contact stops being an event. It becomes a question they asked, and discovered they'd already answered.